Dead Space franchise explained. Dead Space is one of many games in the survival horror genre in which you are trapped in a dangerous world filled with monsters, but it's evident that this is something special from the minute you're thrust into the center of the action and the heart-pounding start to the bone-chilling finale. Dead Space is a best-in-class game that outperforms prior entries in its historic genre in nearly every way, and will be the benchmark by which they are assessed for many years to come, thanks to its hideously twisted aesthetics, incredibly fascinating story, and a novel strategic mutilation combat system. Do you believe a game can ever be frightening? If you say so, you're too stubborn to get out of your seat. Forget about it. You're completely incorrect. And I'm confident that Dead Space's first 20 minutes, which sees petty engineer Isaac Clarke thrust into the darkened corridors of the Ishimura and charged with fixing everything that's gone horribly awry with the tormented vessel while enduring an alien infestation, will extinguish any remaining stands and leave you astounded. Not many games will provide new experiences every time you replay it like Dead Space does. So this iconic franchise deserves a monologue of its own. Dead Space 2008. The story of Dead Space takes place hundreds of years in the future, where humanity has depleted all of Earth's natural resources. Fortunately, humanity has mastered space travel at this critical juncture, and a method known as planet cracking has been invented to counteract the drought. The materials from a heavenly body are stripped, mined, and burned, and the remnants are returned to Earth for consumption. The USG Ishimura, which has done more planet fractures than any other vessel, is the crown gem of its mining fleet, which travels to the stars to complete these missions. Players assume the role of Isaac Clarke, a systems engineer assigned to the scent repair team. Aside from the communication difficulties, Isaac has a number of reasons for landing on the Ishimura. Unfortunately for Isaac and his crew, all hell breaks out shortly after they board the disabled spacecraft. They are struck on the Ishimura when their spacecraft is destroyed. Nightmarish creatures known as necromorphs assault the crew, killing most of Isaac's team and separating him from the survivors. In fact, the game's ambience play a significant role in increasing and amplifying the suspense that the players feel as they progress through the Ishimura. Although there are lots of jump scares, the game's main goal is to throw you into an environment that gets worse as you progress. As soon as you board the ship, you get the feeling that something isn't quite right. This isn't even taking into account the frightening character models of the necromorphs themselves, which look to be getting more and more bizarre with each creature you encounter. The necromorphs are uncomfortable to witness, whether it's the tentacles and limbs that are placed in the unusual places or the changing forms that arise from wayward bullets. Excellent voice acting is used to complement the impressive images. While Isaac never says a word, the rest of the actors do an excellent job of delivering their lines, whether through an audio diary entry or a holographic movie. The use of sound, on the other hand, is a great highlight, as it's designed to send shivers up the player's spine. Dead Space is a science fiction survival horror game that does the genre well, with an intriguing story, intense, fast-paced, and incredibly brutal gameplay, and atmospheric aspects that will get beneath your skin and make you jump. Dead Space should be on your radar if you enjoy survival horror, action, or science fiction. Dead Space Downfall. After spending several hours on the Dead Space game, or even seeing a number of better sci-fi horror flicks, it's clear right away that Downfall, the title's animated prologue, benefits from well-crafted storytelling. Given that the key to any great outer space haunted house film is a terrified hero's lack of information, it's easier to stuff more story into a film that requires less. We're given enough to keep us engaged in a tremendous feeling of wonder for the first frame of Downfall. Then there's the colossal enigmatic relic unearthed on another world, considered the heinous consequences of such an artifact on the mining colony, an increase in homicides, crazy miners wailing hysterically against their bonds, the religious Unitarian cult appears seeking to worship at the item's core, then there's the crazy scientist who's determined to find out what it's all about. The captain arrives, certain that bringing the relic aboard the Ishimura is a smart idea. Finally, throw in the necromorphs. All of this occurs inside the first 10 minutes, with the result that the film concentrates on how to execute the storyline effectively rather than on repetitive specifics. It works as a scary, excellent contemporary horror thriller, as well as a creature-featured action film with plenty of gore and gunfights. That isn't to say that there aren't scares, and the gore is expertly set and graphically performed. Jawbones are shattered, heroes are sliced in half vertically, heads are blown off, and a horde of ugly, thing-like creatures slithers and creeps across the ship. And when the action does happen, it's swift, brutal, and exciting. For a movie of this size and scope, the animation is undoubtedly wonderfully done. Fortunately, the transfer does honor to the craftsmanship, providing a clean and uniform image. Unfortunately, the blood-soaked spaceship's gloomy gunmetal atmosphere only allows for a restricted palette of hues, none of which are specifically vivid. However, the visuals contribute wonderfully to the piece's tone, and a little moodiness can sometimes assist to insinuate the terror. The fact that Dead Space, the game, throws you into a situation with little explanation or recourse, pushing you into the inky blackness and find for yourself that Downfall so plainly states, demonstrates that this series knows how to blend story, tempo, ambience, and violence to fairly meaningful effect. Downfall is beautifully animated and features some inventive murders and appears to grasp what makes its namesake so successful. The clever religious plotline, engaging speech, and a dash of suspense, you have a sequence of terrifying action montages that are definitely worth seeing.
Son, is that you?
Dead Space Aftermath. The story of 4 survivors from the USG O'Bannon is told in Dead Space Aftermath, but to fully appreciate their story, you must first understand how the first Dead Space game ended. In short, engineer Isaac Clarke destroyed the Marker, an alien artifact that was manufacturing necromorph monsters. After the Marker was removed from Aegis 7, the planet began to disintegrate. The crew of the O'Bannon lands on Aegis 7 in Aftermath. Half of the crew is on the planet to help stabilize it while the other half is collecting Marker bits. Of course, we've already established the Marker creates monsters and drives people insane, so things quickly spiral out of control when the first piece is acquired. The storyline in Dead Space Aftermath is exceptional. The film does not follow a strict timeline, instead we begin with the survivors being rescued, followed by their own tales that transpired down below. Each character is led into an interrogation room where they are confronted with their worst fear. As a result, they spill their guts. Things are intriguing, interwoven, and terrible tales. From one guy's perspective, you see how he loses his sanity, and then you see how another person is attacked completely at random. It intensifies the anxiety because you know something dreadful is about to happen.
What? What's happening?
The characters are very well developed and rendered. Each narrative is told in a unique style of animation. This disconnected approach has turned me off previous projects, Batman Gotham Knight for example, but it works here thanks to some contextual choices. The story's main character, the crew of the interrogation ship, is depicted in a sterile, computer-animated style. When the film originally began, it looked cheap, but then each crew member's memories was animated in the style of a conventional cartoon. Having a clean, straightforward anchor works well for expanding out into these other pieces. It gives the twisted stories a personalized feel in terms of both content and context. You are guaranteed to have a great time with Dead Space Aftermath. It's bloody and gory, but it also adds to the Dead Space universe without clumsily slipping in references to the games. There is no forced unitology explanation or long story about the Marker. This is the account of 4 survivors and the inaccuracies they witnessed. You'll get an introduction to how messed up the Marker makes everything if you're not a Dead Space aficionado. If you're a Dead Space fan, you'll learn about story elements that Dead Space 2 barely mentions briefly, as well as meet a character who will play a key role in the series moving forward. Dead Space Ignition 2011. The concept behind Dead Space Ignition is quite cool. Released a digital prologue months before the release of Dead Space 2, a Sunfire January blockbuster that grabs gamers with an exclusive Dead Space 2 item and encourages them to pre-order the sequel. Ignition is free if you pre-order Isaac's Next Journey. Dead Space Ignition is a motion comic in which you get to choose your own adventure. The plot takes place on the Sprawl, the space station where Dead Space 2 takes place. Soon before the Necromorphs attack and everything goes to hell. The tale will be told via the eyes of Franco the engineer and his gun-toting lover, but you'll be interacting with the game through Franco's engineering skills. Dead Space Ignition's gameplay consists of 3 different minigames. One requires you to place mirrors on the circuitry board in order to reflect colored lasers to the correct targets. Another has you to race your line of energy to a goal before your opponent, and a third is a tower defense game in which you are the one attacking. All of these actions result in unlocking of a door or repair of an electrical gadget. The problem is that none of the minigames are particularly entertaining. The tower defense game was just spamming assailants to overcome a security grid. The line game was a mix of a walk in the park and annoyance because the opponent could flip my controls, and the reflected light game was just uninteresting according to general consensus. Worse, this game looks ugly, despite the fact that this is a story-driven game with a lot of cutscenes. Dead Space Ignition takes sloppy sketches and turns them into moving images. It might be as simple as bobbing their heads up and down to resemble walking. The animation also appears to be low budget, and most of the fans did not take this very well at the time. It's a pity that the aesthetics and gameplay are so lacking. Every playthrough has 2 portions where you must make a decision about what to do next. This implies there's a solid reason to go back to play the game, but given how bad it is, I can't see anyone doing it unless they're a Dead Space fanatic. The game includes online leaderboards for each hacking task, ranks your performance at the end of a playthrough. Dead Space Ignition is a great concept, a prequel that leads to the main game, but it's horribly implemented. The voice acting is excellent and the tale is intriguing, but the minigames are tedious and the art is poor. Dead Space 2. Even though it's been 3 years since the events of the original game, protagonist Isaac Clarke is still having trouble. He wakes up on the space station known as the Sprawl in Dead Space 2 to discover the facility overrun by an infestation of undead zombies known as necromorphs. Isaac is struggling from his life from the beginning of the game. This is where you enter the picture. As Isaac, you'll take up your plasma cutter, put on an engineering suit, and go up against the animals who are out to kill you. The primary goal is to locate and destroy the rebellious idol known as the Marker that is causing all of this, but it is Isaac's physiological conflict that makes Dead Space 2 so compelling. The events of the first Dead Space have completely damaged Isaac. During his stay aboard the spacecraft USG Ishimura, he's seen things no man should have to, but it's the fact that Isaac's lover died on the ship after he urged her to work there that scars him the most. The battle is right behind Isaac's struggles on our list of cool things. It's a lot more gratifying than the original. Isaac moves quickly and deftly. You can quickly trample crates and physically assault bodies for loot. Your telekinesis is responsive, and combining all of this with the many weaponry in the game is a pleasure. Slowing a necromorph down, blowing its arms off, then impaling the enemy on a wall with a severed limb is a thing of beauty that never gets old. Dead Space 2 is arguably the best haunted house attraction of all time. The studio removed the elements that slowed down the original game, backtracking, disorientation, etc., and creating a fast-paced game that is both exciting and frightening. On your route from point A to point B, you're funneled via these halls and corridors, and goals appear for you to shoot. I understand that linear is a different term in the video game industry, but this package is fantastic. If you're extremely dedicated, there's even a mod called Hardcore, which is nothing short of awful. The adversaries are at their most difficult, resources are scarce. There are no checkpoints, and if you die, you must restart from the last save. Oh, and in the entirety of the game, you can only save 3 times. Dead Space 2 is more than an action game or a survival horror game. It's a game that tells a deeply personal tale of a man who has been deeply wounded by the events that have occurred around him. That notion is fascinating on its own, but visceral games add satisfying gameplay, shocking opponents, and massive set pieces before dumping into a weird and scary universe. It's a fantastic game that'll be well worth your time and money. Dead Space 3. Dead Space 3 features Isaac Clarke, the galaxy's unluckiest engineer, as he joins the fight to save humanity from the enigmatic markers and their necrospawn. This begins with Isaac setting out to find his missing girlfriend Ellie, who reappears from Dead Space 2 with only a passing reference of her missing eye. John Carver, the first playable co-op character in the series, joins Isaac. Dead Space 3 has a unique atmosphere that few games can match. Everything is rendered in dazzling crystalline clarity because the Visceral Games' highly enhanced Godfather engine. In a solar mist, the eerie depths of space spread out indifferently, capturing the spirit of 80s matte paintings and pulpy sci-fi and scary films. The addition of co-op elevates the franchise from the outskirts of survival horror to the forefront of action thrillers. The sensation of isolation is diminished when playing in co-op, but the scarce and pervasive sense of dread that the franchise is known for remains intact. Single-player purists can still play alone and enjoy a relatively faithful Dead Space experience. The game benefits from the addition of a second player, and assistance is appreciated in some of the more challenging battles, especially on higher levels. Carver's arrival ushers in fresh lines of dialogue as well as a slew of fantastic extra co-op missions that delve into the terrible background that he has. These are some of the more enjoyable moments of the story, because the combat system and the setting Visceral it has created in Dead Space 3 are so well crafted and well built, many flaws would be overlooked. Dead Space 3 is an absorbing and enjoyable game when played in a specific way on New Game Plus. It may, however, necessitate disregarding the band tail and the mind-numbing to-do lists. Then it's all about putting together the most powerful, well-equipped Isaac you could think of. Dead Space 3 succeeds in this area and this area alone, mostly in spite of itself. What to expect from Dead Space upcoming remake? While the trailer was released by EA and developer mode of a EA Play Alive is low on specifics, you can tell that it gives a very good sense of what the full game will feel like. It's creepy. You'll also find a much longer and more extensive developer diary a little farther down. However, the teaser doesn't end with a release date, so we're still in the dark about when the title will be released. We think late 2022 is the earliest you can anticipate it, but don't be alarmed if it takes a bit longer. While the new Dead Space is being rebuilt from the ground up in terms of technology, we should expect the game's story to be fairly similar to the original. That means we'll be reprising our part as Isaac Clarke, a 23rd century engineer dispatched to assist in the repair of the stranded starship Ishimura. It's enough to say that things turn a little bleak as Isaac must utilize his mining tools to protect himself from a variety of horrifying outcomes. We also know that Isaac's original voice actor will reprise his part, but with additional language and a more genuine screenplay. Secondary characters will reportedly get more screen time in order to humanize them and make them more genuine and likable, which could help mitigate the original's brutal attitude to character death. For this remake, the screenplay is where things get very fascinating. We know that EA Motive is creating the game from the ground up. It's a complete remake, not a remaster or port, so they're starting from the beginning. That means that while the core features of Dead Space's gameplay will most likely remain the same, there will be plenty of room for change. Like most of EA's major titles, the game will be completely recreative with the Frostbite engine. The devs detailed some of how adopting next-gen exclusively will affect the game in a large interview with IGN. For one thing, 3D audio will intensify the game's distressing and terrifying sound with pinpoint echoes and clatters keeping players on edge. They also focused on the game's basic combat in which players use cutters and lasers to meticulously dismember the necromorphs swarming towards them. It appears that this will be slightly iterated on in order to make it gorier and more modular, so it may not be as simple a process as it was in the original. The addition of peeling will make it easier to see how much damage you're inflicting to adversaries in a typically grisly way, as detailed in the first developer diary above. We could also see entirely new sequences with the zero-gravity features that made Dead Space 2 so unique, possibly getting more attention in its remake and allowing players to walk around in zero gravity with greater flexibility. Indeed, thanks to more powerful hardware, there appears to be lots of minor chunks of removed content from the original game that may now be possible. Of course, from a pure technological standpoint, the game will just look far, far better than the original, with such lighting and atmospheric effects that will never have been conceivable when it first came out.